Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Ohlone, and the Wendat, and the territory that's now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Thank you. Please think about the same thing whether in Ontario or elsewhere. If I can't pass this test, I can't earn a living. We are dead from a francophone who had just moved to Ontario in a message describing how a lack of service in French was jeopardizing his ability to earn a living in this province. Is one of almost 400 cases we handled this past year, and which can be found in our annual report. It's the case of a truck driver who couldn't get a bilingual examiner at the Drive Test Center in Ottawa for his heavy vehicle driver's license. Truck drivers play a key role in Ontario's economy. Our work in this instance helped a newcomer to enter the workforce and give the province one more truck driver it could count on. He even called us back to say thank you. I got my license today. I wanted to thank you very much for your help and for everything you did for me. Thank you. End of quote. That's why we're here, to promote the right to French language services, because we know they benefit people, individual, and the entire province. Our contributions are crucial for the vitality of the Francophone community in Ontario and for Ontario's prosperity as a whole. Francophones and public agencies alike have thanked us for taking action to protect language rights, and for our professionalism and expertise in empowering the public sector to find ways to remove barriers to accessing services in French. And here is the proof. Since May 1st, 2019, we've published 5 annual reports and 2 reports on investigations and issued 41 recommendations, the majority of which were accepted and implemented by the government or are in the process of being implemented. We've made huge strides in improving Ontario's provision of services in French. I thank the government for its collaboration, as well as the public for bringing more cases to our attention each year, a testament to their growing trust in our organization. I attribute this increase largely to the work we've put in to connect with all those who speak French in Ontario. We are constantly working to give Francophones and anyone in the province who has an interest in French as a commissioner who is accessible and responsive to help them understand and resolve the issues they are facing. This year, I attended 23 community events and several dozen meetings with interest parties of all kinds, including Francophone organizations, elected officials, public servants, fellow ombudsmen, and other independent offices. I gave 21 interviews and posted 12 videos and statements. I visited almost every part of Ontario. I went to Ottawa, Vanier, Sarnia, Landon, Chatham-Kent, Windsor, Timmins, Moonbeam, Kapuskasing, and Hearst, to name just a few places. I met with Francophones who impressed me with their ingenuity and resourcefulness. Francophones who are interested and motivated. One of the recurring themes I noticed in the conversations I had with Franco-Ontarians, as well in our casework and in many direct public interactions, was a lack of awareness of which services of the Ontario government must be provided in French and where they could be found. To improve the delivery of French language services in Ontario, I think it's important to be able to easily identify them. This is in fact the purpose of the French Language Services Act and its regulation on active offer. Therefore, in my annual report, I've recommended that the Ministry of Francophone Affairs develop a digital tool to help people quickly locate the services that are covered by the Act and that must be offered in French. This aligns with the goal that the government set out in April 2023 when the regulation was on active offer entered into force. At that time, the government said it wanted to ensure that French language services are readily available according to the principle of active offer, so that the burden of finding those services no longer falls entirely on users. We are already seeing plenty of initiatives to help identify where services are available in French. The Ontario Provincial Police, for instance, is now permanently flying the Franco-Ontario flag at its general headquarters and its detachments that offer service in French. The OPP is also allowing officers who are able to work in French to wear a Franco-Ontarian flag pin. On the websites of the LCBO and Service Ontario, you can now filter your search results to find branches that offer services in French. In October, the Ministry of Francophone Affairs unveiled a visual identifier in the form of a logo that agencies, designator, and the FLSA can print out and use to more clearly identify themselves as providing service in French. But all this requires an effort on the part of Francophones to follow, research, and learn about different individual practices. With a digital tool that pulls together all the information on which services are available in French and where we can find them around us, Ontarians who wish to be served in French will be able to access these services efficiently without having to wonder whether or not they have the right to them. When this information is clearly communicated, French speakers will have a better understanding of where they have the right to be served in French, and the government will be better positioned to achieve its goal of shifting the onus of identifying and locating services from users to service providers, as stated in the Act. Thank you for another fulfilling year. I encourage you to add www.ombudsman.on.ca to your bookmarks, send us an email, or call to share your personal experience. I'm ready to take your questions now for journalists who are here and on the phone. Thank you. Your recommendation on a digital tool and a digital repertoire, it was already a recommendation to put up to date of the services that exist from the previous commissioner. Was there progress on that? Answered the recommendation that existed before. It was 319, that was a list of organizations that offer service according to the FLS. It's not the totality. The Act, the law covers much more governments, agencies, and others. And there's also organizations that obtain a designation to provide service. So it's larger. What we identify is that regulation, it was not up to date and contained information for almost 30 years that were outdated in some cases. It's used generally to add French language services in the province. We recommended that there be an update, and there was progress. And the Ministry of Francophone Affairs did some update to add services, acknowledge the designation of certain organizations. But there's a lot of work to do. In the annual report, I spoke about children's services that closed, and it was still on the list, even though this child care. So it was obvious that was a bad understanding of obligations of the organization, and oversight that should be done by the ministry so that we respond to the obligation. So I communicated with the Ministry of Francophone Affairs and the Ministry of Education and the organization to remind them. We advance in our work, but we have to have regulation up to date so people and organizations that are responsible for these services be aware that there is oversight that applies and it's done to ensure that they fulfill their obligations, and the public know the right to have those services in French, and it's a reliable offer. And so there's work that was done, but we need to do more so the list is up to date and remains up to date. Another question. It's simple to have a list. It seems updated of each day that works that are designated for French time, because the recommendation is there year after year. Response it should be information clearly communicated to the public and regularly in terms of the process of the Ministry of Francophone Affairs and the public service to ensure that the process allows for an update that's done regularly and the information is available. What we have so far, and we saw the progress, there are efforts to update the list. But we see that the list is not completely up to date. So we need to continue on our end to do a follow-up and for the public service to continue working on that so that information is available clearly and easily. Question, is it normal in 1 year that the ministry is not able to put its list up to date? How long is it going to take? Response, it's more than a year, it's 2 years. And there's information online on social media that should be accessible directly to the public. So when we are proactive, I think we are able to respond to the issues in an efficient manner and fast. But obviously, we have to ensure when we feel we're going to make changes that we sure that the information provided is appropriate and up to date, and the public service process must be respected, but we must sure that the information is up to date. But information takes some time, but I think that with a government that exists from the 1990 or beginning, and I referred my recommendation last year on the regulation on active offer that in 2023 was updated. I think we need to ensure there's a better communication and we be more proactive in terms of language service to offer French language service that be communicated. It's logical to suggest a repertory or lists so that from 1989 it exists, and that I offer now that we have services clear where we find the services, which services, and that's important. So we need to know the service and be proactive so that the services that must be offered to the public in French be on a list, and the public didn't ask questions. To be simple to have services that when they have the right. To come back to that, do you think it's the ministry does not have a willpower or not the capacity to do it? A response, I think, since we have the oversight of the French language services more than 5 years, and so there was a lot of planning done. What this government showed is the system must be improved in general. The planning, performance measures, for instance, and update of tools, the regulation. I talked about training last year that should be on social media, for instance, in terms to be easily identify with a repertory of French language service. So by working, we see where there are issues and where we can identify where efforts must be done to improve the service. Question, what does not work in the Ministry of Francophone Affairs so that they not be able to put together a repertory up to date on the central regulation? Response, the responsibility on French language service and enforcing the French Language Services Act, it goes from leadership of the Ministry of Francophone Affairs, but all the public service across ministries is responsible and has so they must provide reports on their ability to provide French language service. So it's a common effort of cross government that must exist to identify service that the ministries offers, that agencies offer, and to which Francophones have the right. So to have a good planning, we have to be to understand how it's progressing, because services change, the population change, and so we must be able to follow the offer of French language services and communicate to the community clearly. And yes, there's an improvement that can be done in the 41 recommendations that we had. That's what we see, a message. We have to have planning and to be proactive and to be aware of what the services are. Can you say that when we see each other in a year that the repertory will be online and available? A response, I recommended there's a report every 6 months given to me on the recommendations that I give to have a repertory. It's been from the first annual report. We talk about planning, identification of service to ensure that the tools are up to date. The government reasonably should have a good knowledge of its offer of French language service and be able to gather it and to have a repertory, a list that gives. I hope that we'll be able to speak of in important progress when we meet next year. The repertory online that would be functioning, we'll see, and to my mind, what I want, I said the information that the public as a right to have access to, that be communicated clearly on the public tools, the public so people be able to speak French and have the right to obtain service. It's important, the capacity of people to use their French on a daily basis, and so that is important. The annual report, it's important. The financial, for instance, the OSAP, the Ontario Assistance Program for students in a post-secondary institution. There were students who wanted to apply to receive financial help in French, and they were not able. And so it's difficult. After we intervene, the organization, the institution, and the ministry realized that the French Language Services Act needed the services in French, not only in post-secondary institutions that were designated, but across the province, in the whole OSAP system. The OSAP, and so it revised its community pool so that ensure that French language service be available to the whole people of Ontario. Those are important cases and important information and serious, and the public must know. So the more we wait, the more the public questions itself if they can speak French. And so I think that there's an important effort to increase how we communicate with the public. But to come back to the repertoire, are you counting on the Ministry of Francophone Affairs to develop and to have treatment, and so to have to do it, and so that for instance, in Manitoba, there's a pilot project. What do we have? The courts have to decide on that. A response, I think there's an effort that is important. The MAFO has a role, a leadership role, and so so the Ministry of Francophone Affairs of Ontario, and so they play a role so that efforts be done. The ministries are responsible for the applying the French Language Services Act and the asking, and the minister must give reports to the Executive Council according to the act. The whole public service must be engaged and work so that have access to information that is given to Francophones and assemble it in a way so that Francophones have access. No, I don't think only the Ministry of Francophone Affairs will do it. I think the whole public service can use to do it. Yeah, so to be able to give question, but the form that you take would be a tab on the site of the ministry, or interactive with all the ministry, or each ministry would have a page with services in French. How do you see this tool? In a response in an ideal world, I'll let it to the public service to decide if they decide for each ministry, but they'll guide where I'll be satisfied with that information is clearly communicated to the public and accessible, and the information that identified today. But we've seen examples throughout the year. There are tools that were put in place, wide on websites or interactive maps to identify offer of service points in offices where they can, or shops. And so there are best practices that exist already. I don't want to presume, but there is a lot of options, but it's also to the public service as a whole in Ontario to ensure this information is given to Francophones and is accessible to Francophones. A digital tool will work for a lot of the Francophone, but some perhaps where the information should be communicated should have other forms so that the Francophones have access on a daily basis and during their daily activities. And so I hope many efforts will be done to bring us to that place in which would be efficient for Francophones to have access. Question: it could be a map where it shows just an illustration. Response: I think all ideas that were given to us, efficient to provide in communication, should be taken into account. I have a question on the phone. Perfect. The next question, Émilie Petier, Le Droit. Good morning, Mr. Bouchard. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can. Great. You are the dog watcher of Ontario, or the watchdog of Ontario, and so there's updates, it's progress. You say in your report, but it's not 100% to have something. The role a role that was given is to give information to improve the access to French language services in Ontario. When we give forward issues as important that we have in our annual report that show all the results that we were able to give to Francophones to improve the offer of services in French, and the engagement and the priority that we give to have improved offer of French language service at the French language service unit at the ministry, at the ombudsman office. And so what I gave to ensure that these are the suggestions so that they the government follows its obligation according to the French Language Services Act, so that Francophones don't ask questions. And so when there are tools where the information is given, people can identify, and I just identify for the government, and so we'll follow the progress after that according to the law, and we ensure that Francophones have access to information so they can live in French in Ontario, which allows according to the law. Thank you. And it's talking about a repertory, a list, but there are many Francophones, I think, that work in your either seniors or people in rural areas that don't have necessarily access to the internet or a computer. What do you propose for those people? A response: that's why I mentioned that the importance of the ministry is to know the public and to ensure that information at which Francophones and those that want to obtain French language services have a right to access to, that be in their hands and be communicated to them correctly. And the solution provided should take into account in terms of accessibility or other. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Not on the phone? Thank you. In your travels in Ontario, people say it don't know there's a French language service act. What does that to you when you hear that in 2024? Shows the importance of communicating, and that's why I wanted to put in this annual report in particular in Ontario in many numbers. When we talk the size of population on 650,000 francophones that follow that fall under the inclusive, up to 1 million people who speak French, and Ontarian out of 10, one Ontario out of 10 that speaks French. So it's important that we reach the totality of francophones in Ontario. That's why I went to communities to meet people, to meet francophones, to talk of the fact that there is a French Language Service Act and that exists an office like the Ombudsman Office and the French Language Services Commissioner that are there to provide solutions for the issues to ensure that the rights are respected and the population change and diversify and it increases. We saw in 5 years between two censuses the Francophone population was grown by between 30 and 35,000 people, a lot of people, and so we have to have awareness campaigns and people, and that's why I wanted to be so present, and I traveled so much in almost every part of Ontario, and that's I put so much information on the public place to ensure that we give information to the largest number of people. But with a tool like this, we can bring people to an offer of French language services that's alive, visible, accessible, and we have the capacity to give this information to francophones, to link with them, to be able to, that they live in French and work in French, study in French, and also have a public that's much larger. Spontaneously, our people will have access to that information that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. So we are interested to double our efforts to reach the largest number of francophones and people that speak French in Ontario.
I even wrote in an op-ed, the Canadian Review in French, to speak about the students that are in French immersion programs and families that are surrounded by these programs and are impacted by those. Because let's be real, if you are bilingual in Ontario and French is not your mother tongue, you still have rights because of the French Language Services Act, because this law exists. And therefore, the impact of the law should be felt everywhere in the province. That's what we're trying to do here. This is a guide that will be sent to every single resident of Ontario and actually every person in Ontario so that they know what services are available and how to access them. We need to have those services in place because in reality, French is not an official language in Ontario with the same rights as English. Thank you very much for having been with me today. I appreciate it, and happy holidays to everybody.